It's Spooktober, and you know what that means. It's pretty cold. Yep, that's about it. But Sony's recent exploits have inspired me deeply. Why make new content when you can just re-release older stuff that got some mildly positive reception? So here we are, one of the few decent videos I've made, lovingly remastered for you adorable people. At least I'm not asking for a $10 upgrade. Enjoy. Test, 1, 2, 1, 2. Horror is dead and we killed it. Thank you for joining my TED Talk. Have a good day. Fine, there have been like 2 good horrors recently, but a few exceptions here and there won't change the fact that standards for the horror genre are set so low they could limbo under Ubisoft's current stock value. When did we as a society decide to pick the wrong path and accept things that make horror games plain suck? And to be more precise, what even are the elements that make these games bad in the first... Got you good, huh? That was scary, huh? Wrong! That's the lowest form of scares, and it's what 80% of horror games rely on nowadays. When I play a horror game, I want my fears and feelings to be challenged. I want to dig deep into my subconscious and be reminded that underneath this old, classy, fascinating shield, I'm a little bitch. All Jumpscares do is stick in a needle into my amygdala to trigger the most basic fight-or-flight reaction, and all I'm left with are disappointment and the memory of widespread popularity of lobotomy in the 20th century. It's the gaming equivalent of an old haunted house attraction, with the difference that in those things there's at least the psychological torture of not knowing whether the guy dressed as a killer clown is currently going through his meth withdrawal or not.
You didn't get any meth?
But there's also the fact that modern horror jumpscares typically kill the tension rather than enhancing it. Horror, after all, is made of ups and downs, a constant crescendo that ultimately gets some form of resolution, which ultimately releases all that bottled up anxiety. Therefore, a jumpscare should coincide to major events, like ending a level, or the player being killed, or just don't use jumpscares. The only good jumpscare ever created was the one at the beginning of Mulholland Drive. Facts. It was unexpected, effective, and it closed the prologue. What most games do instead is using jump scares to start things off, like the beginning of one of those boring chase sequences in Outlast. Who knows, maybe they just wanna make sure you didn't fall asleep. But I am awake, game, and all a jump scare is doing is adding frustration on top of my boredom. On the subject of Outlast, this might be a good time to bring up the second issue. Hide-and-seek horrors are not scary. You know the drill. Your character suddenly turned paraplegic and wouldn't be able to swing even a tree branch, so all you can do is running away whenever the big monster appears. Whenever I see a developer trying to pull that shit, all I can think is that they're 12 and haven't yet understood that real life and video games are 2 different things. Let's explain that with a practical example. You're alone, at night, in the streets of Paris. And not the nice part. Okay, that doesn't really narrow it down, doesn't it? And you hear some Babadook screaming while running towards you, so you're scared down to your bones. That's in real life. But if it's a hide-and-seek horror game, screw that, I now feel 100% safe. And it's not just because I haven't showered in 3 days and nobody would get close to me without getting gangrene in their nose. Real life is unpredictable, but games need to follow specific rule sets, and when it comes to hide-and-seek horror games, the unspoken rule is, if you, designer, put me in a situation where I can't escape, then it's a guarantee that your damn-ass monster won't be able to kill me. What it means is that I can easily predict how your next scare is going to play. Oh, you want me to use this lever? Well, if I had a gun, the monster could come out of any corner. It could be there, or maybe there. But, given that I can't defend myself, I'm going to guess that it's gonna appear from there, so I can escape through that door, because there's no other option. And that's in the best case scenario, because other times the devs might be too busy adding ray tracing to reflect light on grandma's cutlery to even care about balancing their game. And suddenly we go from hide and seek to straight up trial and error. Yeah, it's again you, Outlast. This makes deaths frustrating rather than punishing, and punishment is a major point in any good horror. You kids and your autosave will never know the sense of dread we older players used to feel back in the days when at any moment you knew that if your mom stepped on your PS1's power cable or a blackout happened, you'd lose all your progress from the last hour. Yes, even playing the Smurfs game was a horror experience for us. Death used to be a way to enhance the terror of stepping into the wrong corridor. Resident Evil games pretty much revolved around their ink ribbons and their scarcity, and as a result, dying in those games was the worst thing that could happen in your life. Mostly because you'd have to see those door animations all over again. Today, instead, games autosave so goddamn much that even a single enemy encounter can be split into multiple checkpoints. God forbid I actually have to put an effort to be good at your game, but I guess you devs are just very eager to see me squirm at the next scripted jumpscare, aren't you? But why stopping at just killing the player? What if me failing to complete a puzzle resulted in the death of another character, or losing a fight was a trigger for a different ending? Those supermassive games pretty much exist entirely around this premise. Shame they're all titles of various degrees of mediocrity. It's just as punishing and dreadful as having my character die, while even being more impactful. Because, ultimately, death isn't really good in a horror game.
Wait, what? Ramana, are you trying to play coy, contradicting yourself in the span of 15 seconds so you can make your already clickbaity video even more insufferable?
No?
Okay, continue.
While failure is a central component of any game that wants to pose any kind of challenge to the player, it's also true that it represents, just like jumpscares, a release of tension. Okay, I think that if I'm going to use the expression release of tension any longer, I'm just gonna be hit by a vocabulary for how repetitive my choice of words is getting. So I'm just gonna call it scary bada boom. Regardless of the genre, whenever you get close to winning, you're tense, and no matter whether you fail or succeed, you get a scary bada boom. But while victory means that now you're going to face a new enemy or situation, failure will just result in repeating what you just did. This can be sort of fine for most games, but not horror, where surprise is key to make the experience scary. I can see the same spooky creature popping up in the boiler room so many times before the fright turns to mundanity and the mundanity to just brain rot. While we previously said that failure should have a tangible consequence, it should also impact or change our subsequent attempts at the game. Well, you can also check my other video about death in video games, but shh. Unless someone finds a way to force Alzheimer's into gamers' brains so they can forget where the spooky lady's hiding. Take a pinnacle example of horror here. The Souls games. Bruh. Okay, technically not horror, but those games scared me more than whatever shit passes for spooky nowadays, so I'm counting them in.
What the fuck is going on?
The signature blood pool containing all our souls from the moment before our death is a perfect way to change things up from one death to the other. Sure, the enemies are in the same position, but this time you have a new source of tension stemming from the fact that you also need to retrieve your souls, which might have ended up in a very tough spot. Bloodborne took it one step further, so that you might have had to kill a specific enemy in order to get back your stuff. And good luck if it was one of these assholes. And even if retrieving those souls is a scary badaboom in and of itself, you still have to survive until you reach the next bonfire, so that relief is only temporary, because you might still find a terrifying goo monster behind the corner. Unless by finding we mean playing a cutscene. One of the worst ways a scary badaboom can happen is in a way that only modern gaming could craft. The cinematic bullshit. I already hardly digest that stuff as it is, but in horror games it's simply unacceptable. Whenever a set piece or in-game cutscene is triggered where some cum dongle monster tries to chop my head off and replace it with a teddy bear, my heartbeat immediately starts following Zack Snyder's movie quality track record. Maybe you think this stuff could startle me, but all it's really telling me is that you, the designer, are now in charge of the action, and you're gonna turn this whole thing into a tour ride where you'll make sure I'll take a long look at the high quality texture of this blood splatter rather than putting me in a scenario where there's any real danger. I mean, is it even real danger though? Fairly sure I've seen all this crappy design since I was a fetus. God, have you people learned nothing from Lovecraft? Okay, you clearly did learn something, just the wrong stuff. So I guess I'll have to spell it out for ya. Fear of the unknown is fear itself. When something is explained and understood, it can hardly be feared. As such, the plot of a game should leverage on the unknown as much as possible. It's a tough balance to maintain. On one hand, you need to provide answers to the biggest questions the player has, but on the other, answering too much will kill any aura of mystique you manage to build. I just wish I could have told this to Kojima before he started explaining all the gastrointestinal diseases those oil wells in Death Stranding could catch. The horror needs to be unintelligible to some degree, else it doesn't feel that scary. But most of all, it needs to be unknown, as in not seen before. So stop calling games that are inspired by Lovecraft stories Lovecraftian horrors, cause there's nothing new in goddamn Cthulhu. We've seen this poor guy explored, repurposed and parodied so hard I am afraid of what I might end up finding if I search for him on different websites. Whatever your monster might be, it's immediately less scary if it has already been fully digested by the pop culture machine and shed out on the streets like bad Taco Bell. All I see nowadays are reworks of The Thing, 20 variations on zombies, 50 different kinds of deformed animals. Where the hell is the originality? I get that there's some irony in asking this in a video like this one. So, tell you what, if you're trying to make a horror game, first make sure you manage to have your first original thought since the time you tried to do some weird motion with your wee-wee and discovered earthly pleasures. Now let me grab my bingo card. Gotta see how that Silent Hill 2 remake compares to this.